Hello everybody! Alright, the teaching link for my sparring decks. This is something that you have probably been following along with if you've been following along my channel at all. The teaching league is now over and is now progressing into the top 4 playoff stage. We are going to do some commentary on the games that were played in the playoffs, and by we I mean myself, joined by the esteemed Tris. Hi Tris.
Hey Ben, how's it going?
Yep, doing very well. And as I've said this countless times, but I'll say it again. Thanks very much for this initiative. The teaching league would not have been possible without your help and your idea.
Nah, Ben, you did far more work to make this happen than I did. So thanks very much for all the work you've put in to make this actually happen.
And thanks to FightingWalloon as well, who did all the heavy lifting for the league itself, organizing it and making sure the games were recorded and everything. There are lots of stats about it. You can check out the Slack channel or the forum thread on SteamHack itself. But for now, we'll get into the sparring decks. Speaking of which, for those of you who are not aware, these sparring decks were originally meant as beginner decks at your nationals, Tris.
Yes. So for a little bit of context, for those who didn't follow the initial creation of the sparring decks, I was trying to figure out how we could bring in new players who didn't necessarily have access to anything more than a core set and give them decks that could be competitive against players that have been playing for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So I came up with the idea that I then spoke to you about and developed from there to build a bunch of decks out of a single player's collection. And from that, you gave me some really magnificent lists and a Wayland list. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, shots fired, right? But they were remarkably successful. So we held our tournament about a month and a half ago. Given that we are hosting a national tournament in a single city that's barely wealthy enough to, host a sort of whole, to have a board gaming culture, let alone a competitive card gaming culture, it was a fairly successful event. We had a number of new players come in, all of them playing with these sparring decks, and one of them actually managed to place second in the tournament, which was really exciting and really, really cool. So props to them for doing so well, but also props to you, Ben, for having built decks that are not just competitive against each other, but that could really go toe-to-toe with some of the more meta decks that were being played at the tournament.
That is really fantastic to hear, because as far as I know, some of these new players have only no more than a couple games under their belt. So it's really impressive hearing that they are able to do so well.
Yeah, it was very exciting and a great event.
I see. All right, so without further ado, we'll hop into the playoffs. Today's game will be featuring Tolaasin, who is the first seed, versus BlackCherries, who is in the 4th seed, for a place in the final. Okay, so today's game will be Tolaasin playing CTM against BlackCherries Alice. What do you think of their opening hands here?
So, having a look at CTM, I would say that this is a straight mulligan. The only card I would be excited to see in this hand is the AR enhanced security, because you really, really want to score that as quickly as you possibly can. The rest of the hand is absolute garbage and not what you want to have at the start. I mean, ice is fine, but not vitally important for CTM. And the fact that it's kind of a pop-up window and an IP block, I think he can do a lot better than this.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting discussion to have, because I think a very, instinctive habit that a lot of newer players adopt is to keep any opening hand with 2 or more ice so that you can defend your centrals. But as you said, this isn't really a philosophy that applies very well to CTM, where you want to see your assets early on.
Yeah, definitely not.
And
you definitely want to put the runner under pressure, especially a runner like Alice. We did this matchup when we were recording the sort of demonstration matches. And one of the things that we realized quite quickly was that Alice puts you under an insane amount of pressure. So you need to be able to match Alice beat for beat. And that means throwing out assets, forcing her to check the remote rather than duck into archives and make you discard bits and pieces. Because while this hand isn't a great starting hand, none of these cards are really cards you want to discard either. So they're not things you want to lose to Alice's ability early.
Yeah, the biggest problem is that, some players might be tempted to keep a 3 ice hand just because you can defend archives as well, which is good against Alice's ability, make no mistake. But, you're not gaining anything from this. You need to move forward as CTM.
Yeah,
if you want to
absolutely.
win.
Because this Anarch rig, they have some fairly inefficient breakers. I mean, Alice has got her Black Orchestra in the opening hand, which is an absolutely garbage breaker, like completely terrible. But the thing is, Anarchs do have a very, very strong late game when they can decide where they want to try and prioritize. And normally, if you allow them to get set up, if you allow them to sort of eat the initial cost of their inefficient breakers, they can normally ride that out and manage it into the late game. So you really don't want to let Alice get tempo on you so that they can get to the late game fast enough that they can put you under pressure that you can't deal with the CTM. Your biggest danger is that you can't score out.
Yeah. And speaking of Alice, what do you think of her opening hand? A bunch of cards that you don't really want to see early on.
Well, this is a tricky one, right? Because as we said with CTM, the temptation might be to hold on to a hand that's got both money and draw. And in this hand, you've got Liberated Account, you've got I've Had Worse, and you've got the ability to go and fetch a breaker like David, if necessary, or potentially more interesting in this matchup, to go and fetch one of your bin breakers and toss it at the end of your next turn once you draw into it. The one nice thing about the Anarch Breaker Suite is that you don't really care where they are, if you've got them in hand or in the bin. But the point is you want to be able to get them quickly because Alice has got that 50-card deck, and that's really dangerous. Ooh, I've just seen Tolaasin's mulligan, and wow, that is so bad. Oh, wow.
I totally thought that was JNet lagging for a couple seconds, but when they didn't change, I was like, is this even real?
Oh, wow. That's bad. So, yeah, as far as CTM openings go, that's pretty horrendous. Because Tolaasin's really got only one card he can afford to ditch to Alice here. Thankfully, it looks like BlackCherries is not going to try and put Tolaasin under pressure immediately. Oh, jeez. This is literally the opening nightmare for CTM. 5 agendas in the opening hand and no way to filter them. Because as far as I remember, we didn't pop in any real cards to allow him to recur things from the bin. So he can't even ditch these cards by dropping them into archives. He's going to have to play a very, very intense bluff game here.
Yes, and as we see the run on HQ fetching one of the 3 global foods. All right.
Oh, this is not looking good.
No, he's really going all in on the bluffing game, Tolaasin here.
I think he has to, though.
I might have been tempted to play the Bew there. I'm not sure.
I think it's difficult, right? With so few credits, the difficulty with throwing a Beal down on the table is that you want to be able to threaten the score if you're going to do that, because you don't want Alice to get in a position where she's rich enough to feel like she can run remotes with impunity. The flip side to that is you might be able to get away with bluffing the Beal as a Mumbad virtual tour, which is the kind of thing that Alice really doesn't want to hit. As an Anarch that's reliant on the kind of burst economy that you get only once you put it down on the table, things like Liberated Account, you really don't want to be in a position where a lot of that value is being eaten up by something like an MVT and the tag that then comes with it.
Yes, being forced to pay 5 credits to trash something and take the CTM trace, that's pretty awful. Now, I really like what Tolaasin's doing here. I think he has his eyes in the right places. Toll Booth on HQ, an IP block on archives to stop any agendas flowing into the bin or to the runner score area.
Yeah, I think that's very wise, especially because without Ice Carver in Alice's deck, that Black Orchestra is going to have to do a lot of work to get through that Toll Booth. It's what? I think something like 9 credits each time he wants to get into HQ, and that's just so unpalatable. It basically shuts off HQ runs once that Toll Booth is raised.
Yeah. Barring a spoon in hand, which, to be fair, Tolaasin has, he can't tell for sure if there's a spoon in Alice's hand. So what would you do here as Tolaasin? You see he spends the first click drawing a card, playing the IP block on HQ, and Enigma on the remote.
See, that's interesting. I might have gone for the IP block on the remote. So typically when I'm playing CTM, one of the things that I'm attempting to do is trying to build a data raven into IP block server.
Yes.
Largely because that server is surprisingly taxing, and it allows you to throw things into that server that force the runner to go and check and take the tag, plus pay the IP block, plus the trash cost of whatever you've thrown into that remote turn after turn, and just bleed away the runner's credits. I might have been tempted to do that and put the hard end the run on R&D, but I don't think it's awful to potentially try and prioritize sticking the IP block and Data Raven combo on R&D instead, given how bad Tolaasin's HQ is looking at the moment. I don't think he really wants to allow Alice to sort of build up tempo and get into R&D and get easy accesses there. So it's tricky.
Yeah, especially given that she has the turning wheel out, which encourages all these R&D runs. So I can definitely see why Tolaasin plays an ice on R&D. Seems like the right line of play. Enigma on the remote is usually something you go for, but keep in mind that Alice's decoder, the Black Orchestra, is in the bin.
See, that's also why I would have hesitated to throw the Enigma on the remote, because the reason why you'd want to put the Enigma on the remote in the case where you've already seen the decoder go into the bin is because it's expensive to install. But once it's installed, Enigma is taxing but not unmanageable for Alice. So you will only really get value out of the initial hit of having to install the Enigma.
Yeah, that being said, going back to what you mentioned at the very start, Black Orchestra is a terrible breaker. 3 credits to break an Enigma every time? Not that bad. I'll take that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, as the CTM player, what you really want to do is try and pressure the runner's credit pool. That's what it means to be a tempo deck, and what it means to try and control the runners. Now, here's a difficult decision. What do you throw in the bin here? I might be tempted to ditch the global food rather than the biotic, and I suspect that Tolaasin will be thinking that that's really his choice. Yeah, there we go. Throwing the food rather than the biotic. I think the biotic to score the Beal becomes a very important line in this game. Oh, Jesus. Especially with the Hacktivist coming out.
Yeah, especially with the Hacktivist. We also note that Mining Accident was played, so Tolaasin is now stuck with 1 bad publicity. This could come back to bite him later.
Yeah, I was going to say, this the raising the pad campaign seems like a mistake, but it looks like Tolaasin might be allowed to walk this back, which is good. I definitely would not have raised something here. You don't want to lose the agenda. Okay, it looks like he's just going to accept it as a mistake and move on.
I think he understands it's a bit hard to take this back because the card trash from Hacktivist had already been determined randomly by the game.
And of course, you don't want to be
in a real-life game. Yeah, in a real-life game, this wouldn't be an issue because you wouldn't be offering your hand to your opponent that way.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, this now puts him in such a precarious situation because the problem that he's got now is that the one agenda he can actually score is in the bin. So this goes back to, so I've just now seen him draw the Data Raven, and this goes back to the conversation we had earlier. Alice has just drawn into the MK Ultra, but the MK Ultra paperclip combo to get through a Data Raven into IP block is incredibly expensive, plus he needs to take the tag. This is the instance where I'd start to try and throw things into that remote over and over again and force Alice to keep checking. Because Alice is becoming really poor. You know, she's got an imp out, but she's in danger of falling into C-source range, into potentially hard-hitting news range. If I remember correctly, we had a hard-hitting news. No, we don't have a hard-hitting news in the deck.
No, we don't.
But we do have C-source into exchange, which is not ideal. You know, sure, Tolaasin doesn't really want to be swapping 2 points for 3 points, but you'll kind of, as CTM, take any points you have to. Especially in a situation like this where things aren't looking particularly good for you.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, even though this deck doesn't have hard-hitting news to punish the runner heavily, it is still a credit tax, and a pretty significant one, given that Alice isn't drawing very much of her money. She just drew into her Liberated accounts, and I suspect she'll be taking a lot of money off that card the next turn, as we see it right here. Alright, but this gives Tolaasin a bit of a window to fool around with these assets, which can now be res as he scores the 15 minutes, getting rid of the Hacktivist.
Fantastic draw,
very
fantastic.
Timely.
That is exactly what he needed.
Yes, and it also opens up the threat of C-source into exchange.
Yes, this now becomes a very, very distinct threat. Because it's not just a 1 pointer, it's a 1 pointer you can take back. It's one of my
Yes,
favorite things
exactly.
to do as CTM, is exchange a 15 minutes for a GFI and then take that 15 minutes straight back.
Because no one loves giving the runner agenda points.
No,
So
I hate it.
Zero agenda
points is my favorite way to win.
For sure. All right, we see an archives run here. Pop-up window into IP block. It seems like Alice will be snagging that 6 agenda point in the project view.
Yeah, and this is unfortunate because I'm pretty sure that Tolaasin, in order to keep his hopes alive here, has to ditch the biotic, which is unfortunate. He'd really, really like to keep a hold of that, I think.
For sure, yes. All right, and we see 2 pack campaigns go up. No exchange just yet. I think Tolaasin might just be drawing for it because being in a very precarious position now, any one more agenda in the bin wins him the game.
What's interesting to note,
or rather
though,
loses him the game.
I mean, what's interesting to note, though, is I've often played games of CTM that look precarious like this, where you've conceded 6 points early, you kind of look a little shaky. CTM can turn on a dime. It really, really can change the game with a single C-source into exchange. So even though this looks really, really bad for Tolaasin, I wouldn't count him out just yet. He's definitely still got the ability to claw his way back into this game. All it takes is one mistaken run that gives him the opportunity to C-source exchange, and that completely changes the dynamic of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think CTM is known for being a corp that can easily turn the tables on the runner, especially if the runner trips and makes a mistake. You know, like ending the turn with a tag, for example, that could be a fatal error.
I think it's one of the reasons why new players dislike playing against CTM so much, because it feels like it really punishes mistakes very, very hard. And it's one of the reasons why I think at high-level play, good players really enjoy playing against CTM, because it makes it such an interesting and dynamic game. Because you're playing on such a knife edge, it's both players. But it's very difficult, I think. Oh, there we go. All right, so the exchange is now in hand. Now all he needs is the ability to try and bait a run somewhere.
Yes, because Alice did not make a run last turn, C-source cannot be played, so Tolaasin cannot dish out the tag just yet. Now, we've been talking a lot about our CTM player here. Let's focus a bit more on Alice. What do you think of her board state right now? Do you think she's in a good place?
This is, it's a second imp to go and throw assets, throw assets into the bin. I like the aggression. I think one of the things that a lot of new players make the mistake of doing against CTM is not pressuring the board, and particularly not pressuring daily business rather than pad campaign. I think too many people are scared that letting CTM have an economy lead is what will lose you the game, and that's not often the case. The biggest problem is you don't want to let CTM draw into its pieces. You don't want to let CTM get in a position like Tolaasin finds himself in now, where he's managed to draw into his C-source exchange combo, which I'm pretty sure he's going to play now. There we go.
Yeah, it's pretty free here. Unfortunately, the runner just installed a daily cast last turn, putting them down to 3 credits, making it very easy to land this C-source here without the corp needing to boost the trace too much. So we see the agenda swap here, and immediately the 15 minutes goes back in the deck.
And that's
suddenly
doesn't just not tie up the game; it gives Tolaasin a 1 point lead, which is the power of that exchange, that C-source exchange combo.
Yeah, so Tolaasin is now 5 points up to BlackCherries 4. So yeah, Tolaasin is now on match point, whereas BlackCherries is not. That was a very different board state 1 turn ago.
So
as we see, Tolaasin draws into agendas here.
Here's the interesting question, right? I think as Alice, the temptation is going to be to want to try and rebuild, get yourself above the 8 credit threshold, assuming, of course, you're playing a deck which you aren't aware that isn't playing hard-hitting news. I might be tempted here, given that we know what's in both players' decks, to play far more aggressively than I might otherwise, given that the C-source has already been dropped. I mean, Tolaasin could swap a Beal for a GFI, but you'd think that that's kind of limited value at the moment. And it looks like BlackCherries is taking that to heart and sort of going for the Anarch, go big or go home, really put CTM under pressure.
Almost as though he can hear you from all the way here, even as we are doing post-commentary. Yes, BlackCherries is going very aggressive on HQ, the correct server.
I think this is exactly the right move, because I suspect that what he wants to try and do is make a run on a central, force Tolaasin to spend some money, drop the mining accident so you gain another bad publicity, and try and then suppress Tolaasin's economy to make it that much more difficult to score agendas. Because Tolaasin's outs now become scoring 1 point and using the data raven that he's got on server 3 to score the quantum predictive model for. Oh, this is wonderful. This is better than I think.
So by forcing CTM to spend 8 credits there, BlackCherries was able to open a very strong window where they are able to index through R&D. Tolaasin obviously not being able to rest the eyes on R&D here and getting a free indexing off. This is huge.
Yeah, this is big because this could be the game. I mean, it's unlikely.
If not for the fact that a lot of agendas have been seen
exactly.
by now.
I mean, what, we've seen 6 of 10? I mean, 4 in 22 is...
7. There is an AR enhancer.
Oh, of course. I forgot the one in the remote. Oh, so 7 of 10. Yeah, I mean, 3 in 22 is not great odds for this indexing. But that being said, if BlackCherries can scoop a single agenda of R&D, that puts him right back in this game. Especially because Tolaasin now faces a very, very difficult decision in, do I score this agenda that's sitting in server 3, potentially putting myself down to 2 credits, or do I attempt to try and build up a little bit of a credit advantage so that I can raise things on R&D, keep the pressure on? Because let's not forget that BlackCherries is also sitting on a turning wheel.
And he just used the turning wheel to see 2 cards, red herrings and a 15 minutes, which is stolen.
That's a pity. But he has played the mining axe and gained himself another bad pub.
Yeah, it's not even a real agenda.
No, it's always, God, it is the most tragic agenda to see in your score area as the runner.
Yes. Also important to note, Tolaasin is going to score the AR enhanced security here to put them on 6 points, as he also takes a bad publicity from the second mining accident.
I suspect the logic here that Tolaasin is using is to say, well, the runner's seen the top 3 cards of R&D because he's stolen. Oh no, so I lie. He's seen the top 2 cards of R&D. He's stolen one agenda, and I've drawn one of the cards. He also trashed the red herrings. So there are 2 cards that I know aren't agendas. Which means that the runner's kind of going to find it a bit difficult to go and hit R&D. I mean, maybe they could hit R&D 3 times, build up turning wheel counters, and then go and burn them all. But that's not really the best play that he's got available to him.
Yeah, so Tolaasin sees his win condition here, probably. Can't speak on his behalf, but it seems like he's going for the 6 points, so that he can get the virtually guaranteed 7th point by scoring the quantum predictive model behind a data raven, which the runner has very few solutions for.
Yeah, especially because he is going to be at 5 credits at the end of this turn, and that's all he really needs to win this game. Sorry, at the beginning of his turn, I mean.
Yep, for sure. As we see an Archives run there were no face-down cards in Archives, so that basically just forced Tolaasin to drop a card. He chose to drop the wraparound, and woo, a hedge fund.
That's very, very timely.
So he shuffles the 15 minutes in R&D. It's an interesting decision because that could come back to bite him if the runner has another indexing, which we can see BlackCherries
I think even just having 3 counters on the turning wheel makes that a little precarious. But, you know, you've got to balance that against the fact that the runner was at 5 points if you don't do that. So one agenda wins them the game. It's now a case of BlackCherries needs to hit 2 again in order to win the game. Plus, Tolaasin doesn't really have particularly good defenses on R&D. Remember that he still needs 4 credits to raise the data raven on server 3. So he can't really afford to go too poor defending R&D from attack.
That's a good point. As we see the Dirty Laundry launch out at R&D, we know that Tolaasin shuffled the deck, so the card on top of R&D is going to be fresh, and BlackCherries might just choose to see more with the turning wheel. And now he has to make the difficult decision of whether to rest the ice. We know the inner one is the IP block. I forgot what the outer one was.
I can't remember. I want to say it's a data raven, but I don't think it is, because one of our data ravens is on server 3, one's in hand. Double IP block. Okay.
So it's double IP block. There we go. All right. I don't think he can. Oh, he does go for the.
That's bold.
Oh, that makes sense.
So here's what I would do if I'm in BlackCherries' position. You have to make the assumption that any card that goes into server 3 could be the winning agenda. I think the thing that he needs to do now is try and deny Tolaasin the money he needs to score. So what I think might be a wise play is clear the tag, run server 3, force him to raise the Data Raven, run and trash one of the pad campaigns with the Imp. Because that means that Tolaasin is now 1 credit short of being able to score the Data Raven, gives you another turn. I don't know. I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this raise here.
I don't either, because BlackCherries made a mistake here. It's a very small mistake, but an important one. They ran with a tag.
And that's the end of CTM. Forgot about the AR tag.
Yes.
Axis Mumbad trashes it because he has to with Imp, and Axis.
But yeah, I think.
Oh, this is drawn out. It's so tragic. Axis to the QPN, the worst feeling as a runner. But that's it. That is how CTM can absolutely change a game in a heartbeat. I mean, it's a magnificent display of the power of that C-Source Exchange combo.
Yes, and all big props to Tolaasin from recovering from that horrendous start. I'm not sure too many players in the world have the stomach to win when they start with a hand with 4 agendas. But, well, yeah, Tolaasin shows us how to do it.
No, very, very, very well played. I mean, I've played Tolaasin a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, and one of the things that he expressed to me was that he wanted to become less worried about playing out of dangerous positions. And he certainly, in my experience, has been becoming a lot better at that in our game. So it's fantastic to see it pay off and all that hard work pay off in this game, where just playing calmly, knowing what your outs are as CTM, and working toward them systematically results in you winning the game. A little bit of luck, clutch to draw that 15 minutes when he did. I mean, that for me, I think is the single most important thing that happened in this game. Because if he didn't score that 15 minutes to get rid of the Hacktivist and give him the fodder to swap for the global food, this would have been a different game.
Yeah, I have to agree with you here. I think Hacktivist is one of the most powerful cards in the Anarch deck against CTM. Even more powerful than the Imp, which can destroy assets. Who needs to destroy assets when you can prevent them from rezzing them, or, force a very hefty price to res all those assets in random trashing of your hand. Yeah, so very well played to Tolaasin. And big, commiserations, but still very well played to BlackCherries as well.
Yeah, agreed. It was
I think at the end there, I think they were gambling on the remote being a one pointer that wasn't QPM or maybe a project build. It just didn't work out that way. That being said, they still made some very impressive plays. Like, remember the indexing play?
Yes, that indexing
that
was, I think, probably his play of the game. Like, realizing that he can force Tolaasin into spending some money, open up the indexing, and then go and snaffle something. Unfortunately for him, 15 minutes, which is not what you want to see of an indexing. But to be fair, he did get rid of a nasty red herrings, which could have then absolutely shut the game out for him, given him absolutely no chance of stealing anything to win.
Yeah, because he was relatively poor that game. Another good play that BlackCherries made was in prioritizing the correct asset to trash. You don't have infinite imp counters. Tolaasin was on top of it by purging the imp immediately. But with what they had, BlackCherries used the imp counter to trash the daily business show, which was a very good pick.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that we spoke a little in the game about the fear that new players have of letting CTM's economy run wild and, using that as justification to ignore things like daily business show. You'll notice that Tolaasin ends this game on a single credit. And that speaks to the fact that the economy in CTM can get drained very, very quickly, raising ice and playing things like C-Source. It's not a cheap combo to pull off. And so denying them the combo can often be more important than denying them the money to perform the combo, because even with the expense of the combo, CTM can normally cobble together the money to pull it off at some point in the game. You're never going to go through a CTM game not having a tag at some point. And so it's the kind of thing that you need to be wary of and you need to play around, but ultimately you need to not let that tunnel you into trying to destroy CTM's economy rather than the important draw cards that get CTM to the point where giving you a tag can be fatal.
Yeah, and that's not even mentioning the fact that Daily Business Show allows you to effectively hide agendas under your deck.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Far out of reach of the runner. Yes. So to wrap this up, a very well played game by both sides. It came down to the wire, and Tolaasin, against all odds, managed to pull it out. So congrats for the 1-game victory, but BlackCherries is not out of this yet. It's a best of 3. We'll be heading into game 2 in our next video.
All right, exciting. I look forward to it.
Yep. So Tris and I will see you there.
Cheers, guys.
See ya.